Welcome to the Pitching Command Show, brought to you by Command Trakker, the smart target that MLB and D1 teams rely upon to measure and train command. Many throw hard, but few command. Visit commandtrakker.com. 3, 2, 1. Hey, joining today's podcast is my son, Sean Boyle, New York Yankees AAA pitcher. Welcome, Sean. I'm thrilled to have you on the show after 24 episodes.
Yep. Hey, thanks, Dad.
Some people might wonder why my son is on the show. The people who know us will understand right away why. And I think the people who watch it are going to soon find out why. Tell us a little bit about how you started in baseball. Like, for example, for the time I was walking down the hallway and noticed you watching a game several times in your room and said, hey, you want to go see a game?
Yeah, that's pretty much where it began. Sports really weren't our thing. Until I, got older and started to, get interested in, just like that, started watching the Mets on TV and, you noticed and you're like, well, why don't we just go to a game? So, I was so happy and excited to go to one of those games. And that was really the beginning. Started seeing it on TV and got to see it in person. I'm just like, oh, this is awesome. Like, I should try and play. And, from there, this is about 8th, 9th grade. First time in sports and I was just excited. It's just something that really seemed to appeal to me. And, when I started it, it was just like, yeah, this is something I could see myself enjoying and keep going with. So.
Yeah, I remember we had never gone to a game before. So I know you wanted to see batting practice. So I wanted to get there early. And we were the first one in the parking lot.
Yeah. And then we waited for the players to come in and R.A. Dickey, I believe that was one of his really big years with the Mets, and it was great.
Yeah.
He stopped, signed the ball, still got it today. I mean, it's just
that was awesome that he stopped and he signed the ball for you. I thought that was really good of him.
Yeah, no, very cool. And like you said, I mean, we got there so early because all I wanted to do was see what was going on, what this whole thing was about, and really experience the whole thing. I feel like that really kickstarted this whole journey that has gotten us to this point. Just that one moment.
Yeah, and I remember that at the end of your 9th year in school, your freshman year, you tried out for the baseball team just out of the blue.
Yep.
And you went down there with I think shorts or something. Like, you didn't go down in your baseball gear because you never had played baseball. So tell them about that.
Well, you kind of hit on it right there. You don't know what you don't know. And I mean, maybe I could have put it together. I should have showed up in pants, having watched as much baseball as I did, but I had no idea what to do. So I showed up, going back to the winter workouts. I was the kid that showed up in jeans, had no business being out there. I mean, practically embarrassed myself during those. But hey, that, I didn't let that bother me. I just kept showing up and, then tryouts roll around and there I am out there in Northeast baseball. It's 30 degrees out and I'm the kid in shorts and a t-shirt, just chugging along, freezing my butt off. And needless to say, I didn't make it. And, there's really two ways to look at it in that moment. It was just like, okay, I didn't make it. Do I just turn it in and, stop trying? Or do I take this and try to figure out how do I turn around? Because, I wanted to play. So ultimately, that's what we did. And, that was an easy decision because obviously I wanted to play. And being competitive, that's one of those things that it's just another milestone or a bump in the road to, get over. So we worked really hard for the whole next year and, found a way to bring it to 10th grade tryouts and then we made it.
Yeah, I remember taking you out to dinner after you didn't make the team and saying, don't worry about it. If you want to make the team, we'll work hard. And next year we'll make it. And then practically every day we would go down to the field down the road. And at that time you wanted to play third base.
Yeah.
And we were doing that for a while. But you worked very hard. And so, I was very proud of that because it was a good lesson where, you didn't make it that time. You worked hard and then you made it. You did. And you became a important member on your high school team after that.
Yeah, I mean, it's crazy to think about. I mean, the only reason I wanted to play third is because I always thought I kind of had a strong arm. We grew up playing football in the back, and I just want a position that I could just throw it, just show off what I could do.
Well, that's a funny story. I've told people many times too, where you would throw from, you were good on third base, and you would throw to first base, and the coaches were yelling at you to stop throwing it so hard. And it would crack me up. It's like, well, they didn't realize you should be the pitcher then.
I mean, hey, we all got to start somewhere. So
You did have a couple really good high school coaches. You had Eric Joyner, and then our favorite is Lieutenant Dan, Coach Dan.
Dan.
Yeah.
Yeah, I remember first time meeting him. I was went to work out my sophomore year, and yeah, he's just coming around. You know, he's popping in and out. I had no idea what a windup was. He asked me to go from the windup, so it's just one of those, you know, kind of funny moments coming from literally no idea about the sport. But
Right.
He's been a huge help along the way. You know,
He's
especially
awesome.
being there, just feeding into you. You know, he's one of those people that you keep close. So,
Yeah,
and
he's
there's a
awesome.
lot of people like that.
Yeah. And then I remember I have an engineering background and in physics. And so you're throwing in the backyard, and I'm trying to give you advice how to throw based upon what I think. I know nothing about baseball. And to this day, we still laugh about some of those early things I was telling you. I mean, eventually I started reading a lot and, you know, learning a lot more. But the beginning, it was, like you said, we knew nothing, you know?
Yeah, if we kept up at that pace, it'd be a different show.
Yeah. But, you know, it's funny. A lot of times, those are the things that are needed to go beyond what the norm is. When you have someone that's outside of an industry come into the industry, they bring different ideas because they think of it that, well, why is it done that way? Why don't we do it this way? So we didn't do it the way everyone else did because we didn't know any better. We just thought of it logically, like, okay, uh, there's more pitchers on a team, so the chances of you making a team are higher if you're a pitcher.
Yeah.
Uh, then we said, well, how do you make a team? Well, you've got to throw strikes. You got to get people out. So we focused on those things and not what everyone was talking about. And that's kind of where a lot of new ideas are born in a lot of industries. You know?
Yeah, definitely. You know, like you said, the number one way for us to find a way for me to play and compete was, you know, we just narrowed it down. Okay, most likely going to need to pitch, and you know, not knowing anything about the game, we really just figured, well, it's better than throwing the ball around the zone, so let's just focus on the zone.
Yeah. Yeah. And so you had been using a Target, some brand, and they were getting shredded left and right. So what we did was we took a backstop and took epoxy paint and we painted a target on it. And I would just call out a square and you would throw to it. And it kind of developed your style to being able to hit a spot on a target. You
Yeah,
know?
I mean, target you just described, you know, looks like a, I don't know, prehistoric relic compared to this thing. So
Yeah. But you know, that target from 6, 7 years ago has been outside for
yep.
6, 7 years in all kinds of northeast weather, and it's still okay.
Yeah.
It's pretty amazing. Uh, Now the other thing is when you got out of high school, you had no offers. You had started to play really well in like summer ball, and then we were trying to figure out where to go. And another friend, Justin McKay, had mentioned Coach Brown at Suffolk Community College. We didn't know him. You went down and you enrolled. And that I think was probably another one of the great things that you did because Coach Brown is an awesome guy. He's an awesome coach. And I think it was like the perfect spot for you. Like if you had gone to D1 right away, I don't think it would have been as good as you starting at Suffolk, you know?
Yeah, I mean, we'll backtrack a little bit, but you know, getting over the hump from ninth grade to 10th grade to make the high school team, like, you know, that was already like one of those great moments, you know, and it really stands out, you know, and big milestone. And then to, you know, carry that momentum through my last 3 years of high school, you know, it was great. Really started to figure it out and enjoy playing. But then, high school doesn't last forever. So now you got to find out, all right, well, what's next? And, I wasn't the best student in the classroom. I was doing well with baseball, but not ready for, an NCAA or whatever. So the combination of needing to figure out a little bit in the classroom and, maybe develop a little bit more on the field, it's like, that was the perfect fit. 5 minutes from the house. And then on top of that, couldn't have asked for a better coach to play for and, really learn the game and how to do things the right way. And it was just the best place for me, like you said. And I think it really set everything up. It really set everything up, heading into, the next few years. And even now, a lot of stuff that we went over there, it's still hold that close.
Yeah. I mean, it's a Hall of Fame coach, but he's literally still a friend of mine to this day because he's such a nice guy. And there are lessons that I've mentioned to people many times where, like, I would be there while you're doing a workout. And then I said, there's one time a guy came in and started mumbling and saying something and arguing with Coach Brown. Coach Brown told him to go in the back for a workout where you guys were working behind a door. And he slammed the door. And then we looked at each other like, whoa, what is this kid doing? And then I asked you later on what happened. And you said, well, after he slammed the door, I told him, we don't do that here. And then that was the end of it. And it was a good lesson to me in a coach setting the culture for the team, where like all the teammates kind of set the tone of what should be done there.
Yeah, I mean, that's by far one of the biggest things I've learned, especially in college sports. You got to have a good culture. I mean, that's the cornerstone of the program. Like, it's hard to move forward from that, at Suffolk, you're getting a whole mix of guys in there. So, Coach Brown really set the tone every year and really every day, and he expected a lot from us. Like, it didn't matter how we played on the field, as long as we were doing the things that he valued, which was, 5 and 7, as he called it, like some good hustle, like, you just always pushing, always trying. It's like, that's all he cared about. And, by come season, we had a group of guys that did just that. So it's yeah.
I think it's very important. That's why I listed as one of the essential things you need to be a pitcher, like I do at the end of the show. The other thing was we had sent your videos and schedule around to people. And one guy who was scouting for the Rangers, I think at the time, was Chris Wimmer. And we didn't know him at the time. He's become a good friend. But he showed up one day to watch you pitch in a game. And describe that day.
Yeah, I mean, we talked about it a couple of days ago, but to me, it was out of the blue. I hadn't heard from this guy. Actually, we'll backtrack a little bit more. He called me, I believe it was either high school or Suffolk, whatever, we'll call it, 12th grade or so. And yeah, he gives me a call, introduces himself. I'm like, all right, this is sweet. I got major league, interest. Like, it's crazy. Hadn't heard, went silent for a couple of years. And then, as we said, out of the blue, this guy shows up to one of the games. I didn't know it until after the game meeting him, but I'm warming up on the side, and here's this guy standing right up next to the fence. I'm throwing in the outfield, and he's videoing and he's watching and almost taking notes. And I'm just like, this is bizarre. Like, has this guy never seen baseball before? I've never had someone watching that close. Go about the game. Pretty sure it was a solid outing. It was one of those games I was throwing on that steel plate covered with sand. But anyway, so good game. And then by the end of it, Coach Brown and Coach Bonet were there, and they introduced, they start talking to Chris Wimmer, and they call me over at the end. They're like, you have any idea who this is? And I'm just standing, face to face with this guy. I'm just like, dude, I have no idea who you are. And then sure enough, they're like, oh, it's Wimmer. It was just like one of those, oh my gosh, you meet this guy, you feel like you know him, even though I don't know. But
he's a great guy. I remember we talked for a while, and then I said, I remember saying, why don't you two talk by yourselves? I'm going to go away for a while. So I left you guys alone for about 15, 20 minutes because I wanted him to get you to know you, by himself. And then we went out to dinner, and he was a great guy, and we've been friends ever since.
Yeah, and just crazy how things begin. But yeah,
So I remember like some of those fields, like in particular that one you talked about had a metal plate with sand on top of it, make your feet slide, very dangerous. And a lot of them had divots right by the rubber. And so we talked about having a different kind of, not a wind up, but keeping your foot planted on the rubber and then moving back. It created a different style. And the reason for that was so that you wouldn't step back and then step into a hole. Do you remember that?
yeah. I mean, we weren't playing on the best of surfaces, so
Yeah.
kind of had to roll with the punches and find a way to be able to perform because if we did it like everybody else in that time, it was pretty easy to be inconsistent with how you're setting up and all that. So we
Yeah.
did what we could with what we had.
Yeah. You're experimenting even back then, right?
Yeah,
And, and then another one that I think is important when you first went to DBU, in your first start against Baylor, you got rocked. And you had something like a 9 ERA with 9 innings, and you were having a rough time. And it was that point you had to figure out a way to then overcome that again.
yeah. I remember, that junior year was not something I'd like to remember, but looking back,
I,
it's important that I do because
I
it's
think it was an
another.
important time. Yeah.
Yeah, like without that year, that was another hurdle to try to find a way to, elevate the level of play and, and keep this thing moving along. I remember, we would talk about things and try to figure it out. And then one day I got a call from Coach Brown. Um, and he's just saying, "Hey, how's everything going?" Obviously, it was going very poorly. 9 innings pitched compared to 30 or 40 innings pitched the year before with him, and I was just like, "Coach, it's not going good." Like I have no idea what's going on. And almost questioning whether or not I belong there. And he was just like, "Well, I was looking at your video, and I mean, this is not like what you were doing. I mean, you're all at it. You're all out of whack." So I mean, come to find out, I believe you two were talking, and trying to figure out a way to like
Yeah.
subtly
Well,
sprinkle it in there. But it was just like
what
that was
happened?
one of those things that we really needed to kickstart the whole revamp or whatever you want to call it.
Well, what happened with that was I saw some things you weren't doing like you had normally done, and you weren't really paying attention to me. And so I called Coach Brown. And I told, listen, if you tell him this, he's going to listen.
Yeah.
And I had him call you. And then after that, if you remember, we kept, remember we had the video in the bullpen that we worked from then on?
Yep.
Remember the little tripod? And so that kind of got you back into, because I had seen you throw 1,000 times. So I knew exactly how you throw, and it was easy for me to see it. Coach Brown had also seen you thrown 1,000 times. So for us, it's very easy to see. But again, I've said to you many times, I could have told you a lot of things. It still was up to you, meaning I could have worked with other kids or someone else and told them all the same things. Uh, you still have to do it yourself, you know, and so you did. But I think these are good things to bring up because I think other people watching this, if they have kids or in high school or college, it's important to note that you're going to have obstacles that you have to overcome. And when you see someone like you that's in AAA, you think, oh, well, it was just easy for them. It's like, no, you had to struggle a lot of times. And that's okay. And I think a lot of times that's the point where you really learn. If it comes along too easy, you don't learn. When you learn those hard lessons, like the lessons at Baylor, it's a hard lesson to learn, but you learn from that.
Yeah. I mean, hopefully there's not too many hard lessons, but I mean, then again, here we are again, rehabbing. It's another one of those hurdles.
Well, the other thing too you came across was when COVID came, you were still kind of stuck in the GCL for a long time. Then COVID came. Then you were working out by yourself. And I remember I made you two targets, the manual versions, and you were working by yourself using the targets, and you worked very hard. I remember you sending me videos of what you're doing. And then the next year in 2021, you shot 4 levels all the way to AAA. You threw 2 no-hitters, one in high A and one in AAA. Uh, that didn't come out of nowhere. That came out of the work you had done in 2020.
Yeah, I mean, like we said, the theme here is, getting over some hurdles, and uh, it was pitching okay in 2018, and 2019 had a good short season, but wasn't enough to finally break it, kick the door into a full season affiliate. So
Right.
I had to figure something out, and it sucks that we lost a whole year of baseball, during COVID, but that was kind of the break I needed to try and figure out what needed to be done. And so yeah, did a lot of work with the target, and kind of had to essentially, but not that really changed anything, because it's probably better if I had a catcher to work with. I wouldn't have been able to make those gains. You know what I
You
mean?
wouldn't have done it. And the other thing too, I remember looking at how you're pitching, and with my involvement with data, I was saying, I called you up one time, said you need a cut fastball, and I remember you saying, yeah, Dad, but I got to listen to my bosses right now. Let's work on a cut fastball in the off season. I said, okay.
Well, what happened was, I tried to throw a cutter or a cut fastball for a long time. Just never figured it out. Just never had a shot, and I wasn't really convinced that I needed one at the moment. I was just like, all right, stick with the sinker slider. And then 21 comes along, and we changed up the slider grip, and now I'm throwing. We got some good horizontal going on it. It's okay. We got two things working for us: sinker, slider. Good. Then you call up. You're like, look, think a cut fastball works well here. It's like, yeah, I hear you, but I can't be messing around with that right now. And then like 3 weeks later, Sam Green comes up and he's like, ever thought about throwing a cut fastball? It's like, all right, well, I got two people, that I respect their thoughts, and so it's like, maybe I should go for this. And then out of the blue, cutter. So it's just like perfect timing, perfect storm.
Well, that was the pitch that you needed against lefties, and that's what I had seen, is that you were tearing up righties, but for lefties, it's like you needed that pitch. And again, to your credit, you developed it, because again, you could tell a guy that, but if he doesn't do it, it's not going anywhere. So no one could take credit for what you did. You can suggest all you want. You still had to do it.
Yep.
And that's an important distinction. The other thing I talk about on the show a lot too is that I told you many years ago that there will be a lot of people that really want to help you. They mean very well. They love you. They want to help you, and they're very, very wrong, a lot of them. And so learning to politely listen to the advice, but not follow it, is kind of something you have to do, right?
It's a skill,
Yeah.
You want to be polite. You want to hear people out, but there's a time and a place for things, and especially the further you go.
Right. And I think the way you figure that out is, one, you learn who to listen to, but also what we talk about a lot is to know who you are, what makes you special, why you were drafted, what's going to carry you on. Like, tell them about what Ben Zobrist had told you on the day that you got drafted, when he called you.
I mean, you essentially paraphrased, but no, yeah, it was cool. You got to know him through Dan Hefner at DBU, and he gave a call when I got drafted, which was really cool. And I was coming off his World Series MVP year, I believe. And yeah, get a call from him. It's like, wow, I got to try to think of something good to say here, or good to ask him. I got this wealth of knowledge. This guy's been to the top, or he's at the top. And so I asked him, what would you tell first year Ben Zobrist? And he said, you got drafted for a reason. You do something that, these scouts like, and that they see playing at the, higher levels. So, hold on to that. and continue to do that, build on that, and essentially, as you said, know who you are, do it really well. And yeah, so for me, it was sinker slider, hold on to that and run with it. And just like you said, okay, we got that, we got really good at it, but what's going to elevate that package? What was a piece that would plug in really well? It's not like I sit there and just go ahead, oh, I want to start throwing a split changeup today, or something, ridiculous, or I don't know, just a weird example, but like the cut fastball fit right into that.
Well, yeah, because from the second book that we wrote, I had those formulas that described pitches by their movement. And then what I had done before that was I had looked at pitchers that as they aged, that still did well. And I wonder why that happened. And I figured out that their pitches were different enough for each other in different quadrants, that even if they missed their spot, it was enough to disrupt the batter timing. And so that's why when I looked at your profile, it was glaring. I could glaringly see very easily, hey, if he has a cutter, he's going to be able to cover left. It's going to be so much better. So that's kind of where that came out for me. I don't know how Sam arrived at the same conclusion,
Yeah, all I remember from that was, we had the conversation a few times over a couple of weeks, and then Sam came into the affiliate and was like, "You ever thought about throwing the cutter?" And I'm just like, "Wow, this is really weird."
Yeah.
But no, I mean, kind of talking about what you said about the different quadrants. It's like after the 21 season, I remember I got to face Derek Hall up in AAA, a couple of times, and I hadn't talked to him a bunch. We're friendly, but he gave me a call that off season. So we're just shooting the breeze and going through some stuff, and he's just like, "Dude, like, really cool to see you, shoot up there and facing you." It's just like, he wanted me to know I got 3 or 4 pitches that if I just funnel them down the middle and let the break take care of it, it's like, dude, that's tough to handle. And that meant a lot coming from him. He's a really good bat and thoughtful player. So it's like, to hear that from him meant a lot. And I think it supports what we had talked about of, finding pitches that go to those different quadrants. The batters just have a lot to think about at that point.
Yeah, because I talked with Hefner a lot about that too in the last episode, which was that a pitcher that has 2 things, the batter can handle that and they can game plan. When a pitcher has 3 things they can do, it becomes really hard. At 4 things, so the more things that you can do, the more things the batter has to think about. It becomes, I described it as a jack of all trades, master of none. So if they try to be ready for all of your pitches, they will master none of them. And I've always described as all of these batters, as you go further up, know exactly what you throw, the shape, the speed, everything. But they don't know when and where you're going to throw them.
Right.
And they don't know the speed sometimes. Like Bronson Arroyo talked about using the same pitch at different speeds. So he would talk about throwing soft. So he'd throw, like, say his sinker is 91. He would throw his sinker at 83. So it essentially became a different pitch.
Yeah.
And that's pitching. I mean, how do you think of it in terms of what you mix with your pitches?
I mean, I definitely haven't gotten into that area of, taking some off the fastball. I've heard of a couple of guys doing that. While I was at DBU, Colin Poche was like the pinnacle of pitching. An example, he had passed through the program at that point, but he was a guy that ramp it up to 95, 96, and then, next thing you know, you take a little off, and he's throwing 81-mile-an-hour fastballs. But same thing what you mentioned about Bronson. It's like those guys are playing the game within the game. For me, I try to change the shapes, locations mainly. I could definitely benefit from maybe taking some off, and the front to back kind of thing. But no, it's cool stuff.
Yeah, it's a multiplier then. So, for example, if you've got 3 pitches, and now if you can make one of those pitches hard or soft, you essentially have 4 pitches.
Yeah.
You know, Bronson used it a different way. He used it as a way to ramp up uh, his command in a bullpen. So he's starting out slow and working up, and he thought that helped him have better command. Now we were talking about overcoming obstacles, and this year you got Tommy John. You've been going through recovery very well. You're throwing now. Uh, you've got your brand new target behind you. It's the electronic version. So
Well,
how's it
no,
going?
no, no. By what you said, we have the manual version and the automatic version.
Right.
Sports edition. No.
Yeah, and this target you also helped with too. Remember, I had the first one, and you remember when we first threw to it, I had a switch in the back, and the
Yep.
vibration of the impact made the switch turn off. So we
Yeah,
had to get rid of switches.
we're drilling the holes through the cellophane, shatters. But
Yeah,
no, I mean, same thing. You gotta trial and error it. Find a way. And
exactly.
we could have called it quits right there and said, "Oh, this ain't gonna work." But
We don't. We don't. Hey, we're Boyles. We don't do that. Do or do not. There is no try. Right.
yeah,
You know how much everyone knows we've been involved with data in the books we've written.
okay,
And I'm always telling people, uh, even I was talking with Scott Lovecamp the other day about this, about when using data, but not having data be used blindly. I always try to remind people that data is kind of a tool that is used to give you a guideline, or it's part of the sense you use it. Like you're reading batters, you see what their take is, what their flinch is. You look at the situation on the field. You might look at a heat map, but the heat map might be for uh, several at bats, 20, 30 at bats in one heat map. And I try to remind people that when they look at that data, well, uh, it's doesn't give the context of what happened. For example, if they're giving you a heat map of sliders hitting a location, they're not showing you sliders that were preceded by a sinker or preceded by a cutter.
okay,
And so, like a slider preceded by a cutter or a sinker or some other pitch, it might have a different result than the other. So, like for example, like when they give a grade to a pitch, I don't agree with that because I think a pitch is only as good as the setup pitch. And I think a lot of people forget that. So they give a grade to a pitch and they chase a metric. They want to get the certain movement, not realizing that it may be the pitch before it that enhanced that pitch. How do you deal with that?
Well, my first thought was, as you were first breaking that down, was, um, when we're working with TrackMan, and it's real easy to get caught up in shapes as a pitcher. You're looking at. I feel like a lot of guys look at maybe three or four things, like velo, the vertical, horizontal, maybe the location, but probably the big one is the velo and the shape. Like, everybody's chasing that number. And that's good in a certain setting, when you're training and trying to figure out a specific shape or whatever it is. And it's trouble when you're getting ready for a game and you're throwing and you're looking at the unit and you're saying, "Oh, my, the shape is awesome. All right, I'm ready." And then you get in the game and you forgot to realize, "Oh, I need to put this shape in the zone or where I need it in the zone," kind of deal. And that was something that really clicked for me. And about halfway through the 22 season, it's like I'd been chasing shapes all year and was finding a way to put them in the zone and mix it up and stuff. But then I got greedy and was really trying to up the shapes on the pitches and stuff like that, and started getting away from what made me, valuable and what made me a competitor, a player that's going to get the job done. That's putting the ball where I need to, when I need to. So, distinguishing that was super important. And then not just go ahead and saying, well, my pitch is my slider. Like, I'm just going to go ahead and rip sliders, all day. Like, well, kind of what you said is like, as much confidence I had in my slider, and I do have my slider, I have to recognize when to set it up or how to set it up to make it that great
Exactly.
slider. So
Exactly. Because if you throw 3 sliders in a row, I think the third one goes out of the
well,
park.
now there is a
So,
time for that, and you have to be that's part of playing the game. You have to be able to read when the time is for that. There's some
yeah.
guys that just won't make the adjustment. All right, then why, you know, this game's hard enough. Why make it harder? You know what I mean?
Well, yes, but I always take the point that I assume, in especially double A and up, they're all professional hitters that they're going to make the adjustment. So that's why I take it to that point.
Yeah, I mean, um, on the contrary, there's everybody has a good day and a bad day, and you got to be able to recognize when you got a guy where you want him, and sometimes you have to recognize when not to overthink things. But 9 out of 10, you have to be ready to set up those, your pitches.
Well,
There's
I
some
think
guys
it's
that can just go ahead and just repeat it, and they'll get a good result for an inning or two. But in my scenario, trying to go deep in games and stuff like that, you have to change things up and keep guys guessing.
yeah, I think it's so important that you can recognize what the batter is capable of and trying to do. And then in order to take advantage of that, you need to command all of your pitches. So if you can command all of your pitches, now you based upon what you can see, you can take action. You know,
Yeah,
like Heath talked about a sinker guy. They're trying to bring him up, so they're waiting for a ball to be up before they swing, and then a sinker up gets hit out of the park. Same thing with a guy with he talked about a high rise fastball guy. They're trying to wait for the ball to be lowered, like you said, beat it to the belt. So the batters all have their plans waiting for a mistake.
yep.
And I think the better command you have, the less chance you're going to have a mistake. I also wanted to talk to you about the difference between, I saw big differences, guys from the GCL and lower levels. Then when you get to double A and up, I saw a big difference between batters there. And how do you deal with those two different styles?
Yeah. I mean, a less experienced player, uh, from what I saw, they seem to be ultra aggressive, undisciplined. So you can you can pretty much generate some good results by throwing the ball anywhere around the zone. And then you could walk them out off the plate pretty easy. But then once you get into some, guys that have a plan put together, they're talented across the board. It's like that's where it becomes super important to be able to, move the ball around and listen to what you see from them.
When I talk to hitting coaches, they often talk about the best hitters looking at lanes because they're looking for a certain pitch in a certain lane. And I think as a pitcher, uh, you have to be able to recognize that. Have you seen that, like batters that were hunting a certain pitch or a lane, and then how do you deal with that?
That was probably the biggest lesson learned in double A was that you got to recognize these guys are looking for something. And they get better at that, the higher you go.
Yeah.
And then that was part of what I tried to get at, listening to the batter, so to speak, but it's really recognizing is what I should have said. They'll tell you what they're trying to do. And the quicker that you can pick up on that, the better you can approach, handling them and getting them out. And that was a big learning moment, still digging through on that, but you can tell just how a guy's swinging, what they're looking for. If they're lunging and going for a slider, you could think, oh, this guy's aggressive. He's not really on it. But I found that that's the guy that is looking for the slider, and he's going to go get it. He's trying to go get it. And if you do leave that ball, too much plate or too high, even if it's off the plate, well, they're going to get it. So that was the first example that jumped out to me of, oh, that guy's not unable to hit the slider. He's trying to go get my slider.
Yeah. And then you have to have the what I call the pitching gamuts, where you have to have a plan ahead of time of how do you deal with a guy who is aggressive hunting and leaning for your slider. Well, what's the pitch you throw to that guy?
Right.
And so I talk about gamuts with people to figure out, well, not that you want to be scripted in how you pitch, but more that you don't have to think too much because you already got that in your toolbox. Okay, he's doing this. This is what I do. Kind of like in chess. You know, in chess, you have chess gambits. So you don't have to think as much in opening moves, you know?
There's certain guys you could tell they have an approach, they're sticking to it, they're not coming off it, and from there you have to, you know, go ahead. But there's also guys that it seems to me they'll change mid at bat, and being able to pick up on that is crucial because you know you could have a guy that's got no chance on your slider, but then he's like, okay, well, let me think about what we went over with hitting coaches, and for me, going to my slider a lot. So maybe he then adjusts his plan to try to take the slider away. And then at that point, it's like, well, if I've already shown a sinker in that case, if he's a righty and he's taking, you know, he's trying to take away my slider and he's still able to stay on the fastball, well, good luck hitting the changeup kind of deal. You know what I mean? Like, so those are kind of things that jump
that's
out
what I
to
was
me.
talking
That's
about.
how you like, that's how you adjust mid game. There's tons of options to go through.
Yeah, that's what I was talking about. It's like these fallback plans of when I see this, or this, I know what I'm gonna like in
I mean,
chess.
honestly, so that's really how I try to approach every outing. It's like, yeah, I'm not going to hide any of my best stuff. I'm going to come at these guys with what I do well and go from there. But what you just said is it's important to recognize when to fall back and what to fall back on.
Yeah, it's like I said that like the chess opening moves. You kind of if he does this, I know what I'm going to do already. Yeah, I may have three options I'm going to do, and I'll pick one of them, but at least I have them in my pocket.
Yeah.
You know? The other thing we were talking about too was being a good teammate. And I saw an interview with you that I tell people about. I was really impressed with, and you were talking about how in Suffolk you didn't really root for or against your fellow pitchers. And so when you went to DBU, they taught you to kind of be behind all your teammates and root for them. You described how you carried that into the minor leagues and that it helped your teammates and it helped you at the same time.
Yeah, I mean, professional baseball is a different arena because a lot, you know, this is everybody's career. They're trying to make it to the big leagues, and so it could be a little self-consuming. You know, it could wear on you a little differently. Whereas in college and high school and all that, it's really focused on, well, if the team does well, then I had a good day. You know what I mean? For the most part. Whereas professionally, you don't have a good day, but the team does well, you know, it kind of sucks. You know, it wears on you a little bit. So if you could find a way to take that pressure off and focus on, you know, people around you, especially in a professional setting, like you're with these guys 6 to 8 months out of the year, you know, you're with them all the time. It's like you might as well try and find a way to enjoy it because there's going to be a lot of ups and there's going to be even more downs, you know, along the way. So, not to be cliche, but baseball is a game of failure. So you find a way to move past that, and you know, it's going to make the day to day even better.
Yeah. You know, I think you're right. You don't want to ride the highs too high and the lows too low, you know. Or in that poem, If, you remember, it said to treat triumph and disaster as the imposters they are, you know.
Hurdles,
Remember
get over the hurdles.
Yeah. Remember I had that poem on a plaque in your room?
Yep.
So when you're working on command, well, you know, using the target like behind you, how are you thinking about working command? Is it solely in your mind, like the focus, or are you looking for a feel? Like what are the ways that you work on command?
Well, first thing, you know, you have, for me, I have to identify the spot. I mean, I think a lot of guys do, but like having this, it's a little bit different where you can, it's not moving, you can see it. So like, okay, that's where my desired end location is. For me, I try to then take a position between my end location and my starting location and essentially throw the ball. I throw a ball through a hoop. You know, I'll put the hoop between me and the target and try to get it, you know, to break or whatever, or start there and end in a different spot. But I think we kind of touched on it before is, you know, when you start introducing, you know, TrackMan and stuff like that to give you some feedback while using something like this, that's when I start really putting this feel with a number, with a location kind of deal. So like, you know, if I'm using all three, that to me is what's going to help me really hone in, because at the end of the day, it really is something I feel off my fingertips.
Mhm.
But all three things that I just mentioned, when I add them up and when they're right, that's how I really find what that good feel is, what I'm going to be able to take into a game.
Yeah, so it's focusing on the target, but also having a keen awareness of how your pitches move because you're going to have a start location and end location. So you really have to know how your pitches are moving. And like you said in a bullpen before a game, you're kind of using the TrackMan to see how your pitches are moving because then you know
Yeah,
how to aim.
that's just a checkpoint at that point.
Yeah, because now you know how they're moving and you know how you're going to start them to have an end point, right?
Yeah, I mean that for me, it's really just okay. If it felt good off my hand, am I validated on the iPad there saying like, oh yeah, that shape was good or it wasn't good. There's been plenty of days where I go out there and I'm executing my pitches, but TrackMan doesn't like me. You know what I mean? It's not my friend that day. But at that point, you just have to say, all right, I'm going to battle with what I got. I'm gonna
Well,
make it
here
happen.
comes another thing that I talked about a few times on the show that I think when you have a good bullpen before a game, it may be not such a good thing for you because now you go into the game, you think, oh, I'm going to have a good game, totally confident, blah, blah. When you have a bad bullpen for the game, you're nervous. Oh, now your senses are very heightened, and now you're really heightened. Your focus is heightened, and you wind up having even better game. Like for example, the time before your AAA no hitter. Talk about that bullpen, and then let's talk about that game.
Well, I don't think we have to talk about that game a whole lot. You just kind of
Yeah.
worked on that one, but it's one of the worst bullpens I'd ever thrown. Really didn't have the feel for my shapes or anything, and that was one of those days TrackMan didn't like me. So I'm just like, well, it's time to go, and I don't feel prepared. But at that point, you just have to take whatever you got and be a competitor and play the game. And you're gonna try and make adjustments along the way, and which I'm thankful that day I was able to make adjustments. But had I just taken what that pregame session gave me or told me, I would not have expected that game to follow. So,
But do you think
that's just a good lesson.
Do you think that it caused you to have a heightened sense of focus and awareness when you started pitching?
It definitely made me focus on, executing my pitches, getting them to the spots I needed to. There's because I struggled with that pregame, but more so I struggled with the shapes of the pitches. So I think that's a good lesson that, shape is good, or shapes are important, stuff is important, but at the end of the day, if you can command your pitches, execute them, and get the ideas of what your plan are, and take care of them, you're probably going to have some success.
Yeah, because you were in that zone all game. I remember that. It's like first pitch strikes. You were just they couldn't sit back and wait and take pitches from you. They had to be ready. And
Yeah,
then when you mixed your pitches, then you had them off balance all the time.
yeah. And there's definitely been games where I feel really good coming out of the bullpen and do have a good game. But there's also been a couple games where I feel really good with my pregame session and then come into the game and it's like, I'd hate to say it like this, but could it have been that I let my guard down? So
Well, that's what I'm thinking. I've been asking people about whether that overconfidence is a bad thing, and whether uh, that feeling of unease of not, like you're not totally confident, so you're fully aware and your senses are heightened. That maybe it's a good thing.
yeah,
What do you think? I don't know. I'm just asking.
I mean, I couldn't give you if I gave you an answer, it'd be just as good as the next person. You know what I mean? But I do think there's something there.
Yeah, I do think that focus makes a big difference in command. Like you remember when we were first practicing, I always had you kind of close your eyes, visualize the pitch move, hit a target. I always thought that visualization, that focus was really important. What kind of techniques do you use to kind of help with your command in that way? Do you visualize that still?
I mean, I have for sure, and there's moments that I do that. Um, I think the biggest thing, what I try to hit on there is I always try to throw to a midway point between me and my target, and you know, I could see it by looking. If I'm looking from me to you, like I could put something in between us, and I feel like in that it's kind of that visualization of.
Yeah, because you know how your pitches are moving. Yeah, I think that's important. Yeah,
And depending on the day, if they're not moving the way I want them to, I don't harp on trying to hit that same spot. I just say, okay, well, if they're not moving the way I want them, I'm
let's
going to
move
move
the
my
spot
spot.
over.
Right.
Yeah, yeah,
It's not
exactly.
rocket science. Yeah, this game's hard enough, so try to find ways to keep it simple. And I think that helps a lot for me, making adjustments during the games.
Mhm. So last year they wanted you to get more innings in, so they had you go back to Double A as a starter, and you crushed it. You had the most innings of any Yankee minor leaguer, and you had the second most innings of any minor leaguer of any team. You also had 10 quality starts in a row, the most in I don't know how many years. But you started the year a little bit struggling. What happened there? How did you overcome that? And what did you find that you overcame?
I think probably the biggest thing was early that year. I was, I felt a little bit of pressure coming off of 2021, trying to find a way to make another good year, put another good year together. Um, so that's not the right frame of mind to be in. You got to come in and be ready to attack and that kind of thing. Touched on it a little earlier as well. Focused a little bit too much on shapes, versus the command and the execution of those pitches. And once I kind of kicked the numbers to the side, and stopped looking at the iPad to try and find my shapes, because at that point, okay, I had them. Now it's time to put them where I need them. And once I started focusing on putting them where I needed them, then we started, seeing those good games kind of stack together.
Well, that's a good point then. How do you know where you need them? Because having command is one thing. Uh, Knowing where to command it, where to throw them is another level.
Yeah, I mean the starting point for that was simply just get them in the zone. I've always been a guy that relies on pounding the zone,
Yeah.
and I do willing to bet I'm going to continue to be a guy that relies on pounding the zone and moving the ball
Oh,
around.
well, that's you. Yeah.
Right, that's fine. So when I'm not doing that, it's a big wrench in the mix. I gotta, you know, fix that. Um, so that was the starting point, and then from there, started finding the blue zones and where the ball was not getting hit and that kind of thing. So um, just kind of ran with that.
Mhm. Yeah, I think it's important that uh, we talk about having a certain number of pitches. That I like to say that you have to have all your pitches commanded. But then there are days where you only command one, the others you barely have control over. Like, how do you work through days like that? And of course, when you're commanding all your pitches, then you get no hitters and all that stuff. But then there are other days where you don't have all your weapons. You
Yeah,
know,
I think you hit on the majority of days where you don't have all of your weapons. Um, it's a game of adjustments, and finding it along the way is certainly what seems to happen for me more times than not. But most of the time, I'm going to go into a game and I'm going to try to make sure I have my sinker, or I'm going to try to make sure I have my slider. Like, if I get one of those two working, all right, I can pitch off of them. And then hopefully, along the way, I'm able to make those adjustments, and you pick up that third pitch or the set, whatever it is, you pick it up later in the game and finish strong kind of deal. But um, yeah, I can't think of many games where had all four working, and I think I sound like a lot of pitchers out there. Like you're not going to have it all together at uh, 95% of the time, maybe even
yeah,
less.
yeah. It's like that saying from DBU. We always talk about winners find a way, right?
Yeah,
You got to find a way. And it's like
It doesn't
So
matter
like,
what the iPad says. At the end of the day, when you cross the line, you got to go out there and you got to be ready to compete, win the game.
yeah, and the other one that you and I talk about all the time from Monty Python is none shall pass.
Yeah, no free
I,
passes. Those are
yeah,
bad.
yeah, exactly. Well, that's the other one. No free passes. I always say that because if you give up 2 walks and a home run, you're down 3. If
Or
you,
two walks and a base hit. There you go.
yeah, so the walks are they're really bad. But I think the mindset that's why I was talking about the mindset before. I think mindset is really important. You know, and including being overconfident, I think is not good. You know,
Yeah,
I
I
don't
mean,
think that.
you got to find what works for you. I'd
Yeah,
like to think for me, I found staying even across the board really helps.
yeah. Now, what is your resting heart rate?
Under 40, 38.
Yeah, that's controlling uh, your emotions a lot too, because I think being able to kind of stay steady when things are going all around you is also important to focus and everything else.
Oh yeah, nothing's worse than covering the bag at first base. And now you got to try to compose yourself, get your breath down, make a pitch, and now you got 15 to 20 seconds to do it. So
Yeah, and then running to third base to cover and back. Yeah, exactly. That's a good thing to bring up. Like there are days where things aren't going well. How do you rein that in and kind of push that aside so you can go forward? You know, that's a skill to doing that.
yeah, I mean that's the theme of professional baseball for sure. The theme of
I
baseball in general.
remember I remember one game going to see you. I think it was in Pennsylvania. We were waiting in line. We're like delayed, and before we got in, you had started the first inning. I think you had given up 2 or 3 home runs. All right, and then we go in to watch the rest of the game, and you did all right, but you just had a rough beginning. And I kept thinking to myself how impressed I was because you didn't get rattled, and it was rough to handle that, but you found a way to push it aside, to push through. Uh, how do you do that?
Yeah, I mean you just have to recognize, not every day is going to go your way, but all you can control is what's ahead. So I mean, I'm just going to keep it real simple there. You can't worry about what happened. You just have to recognize, okay, that didn't work. Let me try something new.
Yeah, but you remember that day, right?
Unfortunately, there's a couple days like that, but yeah,
Yeah, there's been some bad ones, but also I think days like that can be good lessons. If you learn from them, they can be good for you. If you don't learn from them, then of course, they're bad days.
yeah,
But I think they're hard lessons to learn, but they're valuable to learn. You know. And then the other thing, my favorite physicist, Richard Feynman, had always said the best way to learn something is to try and teach it. Uh, I'm a big believer that if when you try to teach something, it causes you to find different ways to explain it and understand it. And you've been giving lessons to kids lately. How's that going?
I mean, solid. It definitely brings you back to the basics and gets you thinking about things. And we've had the conversation plenty of times where it's like, trying to boil it down to this kid, and next thing you know, I got this new understanding. So, yeah, there's
Yeah,
some truth there.
yeah. I think it helps you. It helps them. I think it forces you to find different ways to think about the same problem or technique.
Yeah, this is a really simple game that we make really hard sometimes. The game is
Well, at
definitely
the
hard, but
well at the level you're playing, it gets little intricacies. It's more
yeah, but at
difficult.
the end of the day, it's you got to do a couple things right. You know what I mean? And you just have to find a way to do that every day. But sometimes there's like those moments when things don't go your way, or you give up 3 home runs or whatever. And you're sitting there scratching your head. You can sit there and overcomplicate things a little bit.
Yeah,
Sometimes there's a time to do that. Sometimes you have to pull things apart and figure it out. But
yeah. I think after the game is when you do that.
what I'm getting at is sometimes the overwhelming majority of these moments are, okay, let's not panic. Let's not overdo it. it's pretty clear that, okay, maybe the pitch selection was poor or the execution was poor. You know what I mean? It's like you don't have to go and reinvent the wheel of what you
Yeah.
do.
Yeah, exactly. I think pitch selection and sequencing, it's a big factor, because I've seen many times where two pitches are thrown and reverse the order, it's a strikeout, reverse the order, it's a home run. I've seen that many times. Now, uh, with the pitchers you've seen that have been successful, that do well, what do you say is like a common quality? What are the common things they have in common?
I mean, I would say the majority of them have a go-to pitch and are working with at least two consistent pitches. Like they're just filling them up, filling the zone up with them.
Now, is that with control or command?
Well, I
Just
would say
filling the zone with control.
at least one they're commanding. You know what I mean? They're moving it around. That's their go-to. Um, and then after that, I would say two more that they can control. And then the really good pitchers, they got two that they're commanding, at least. So, and that's a really tough thing to do. But yeah.
All right. So, what would you say is the best advice you ever got? And you don't have to say it's my text that I send you every game, which is BU command and mids.
Yeah. Well, along the lines of that, just knowing who you are, that's something that you reiterate every game.
And
Probably
I
the first
think I
time
got
it
that.
explicitly said was Zobrist.
I think I got that from when Ben Zobrist had told you that, right?
Yeah. I mean, there's plenty of guys I've seen that don't know who they are and they're trying different things all the time, and it's hard to be consistent when you're inconsistent, So I don't even know if that makes sense the way I said it, but
Yeah,
you
I know
get
what
what
you
I'm
mean.
trying to say. Yeah.
I know what
So
you
it's
mean.
like, yeah. So
It's
you
like
just
it's
have to
like
be
that
able to.
it's like that restaurant that no one goes there because it's too crowded.
Right.
And when you get to the fork in the road, take it.
Oh, geez.
They all make sense when you really listen to them.
Yeah. So that's probably the first thing, and then after that, I'd say it's being able to have a routine that works, and sticking with it and knowing when to make those adjustments. Because again, I've seen plenty of guys constantly make adjustments to their routine and change things, and it's just like, well, did you really think about like why you're changing that and that kind of thing? So
I remember talking to you a long time ago when you first year you're playing. I was saying that before you change anything, we got to sit down and talk about it, really think about it, so that you're not hopping from one thing to the other. Because I saw that as could be a big problem too.
yeah. So, and especially the higher levels, again, you're there for a reason because you're doing a couple things really well. So, when you go to make a change, think about, well, what's going to be affected by this change.
Yeah, it's important. Uh, at the end of the show, I always put a list of 9 things that I think are important for a pitcher to have, and that I tell everyone that if you had all 9, you'd be a Hall of Famer. So everyone wants them all, but I say try to pick your top 4 that you think are the most important. So I'm going to put them on the screen, and then I'm going to read them off so that people listening can know what they are.
Okay.
Okay, so the top things are character, command, changing speeds, movement, max velocity, sequencing, reading batters, mental toughness, and know who you are.
Yeah. So for me, I'm going to say command, know who you are, reading batters, and I'll go with movement.
Okay. I think that was the fastest anyone picked them in 25 episodes.
I think
Right,
probably the biggest. No, I was going to say I think probably the most important you know, you got to start with knowing who you are. Like,
Yeah.
like that's something
Yeah.
that's cord with
Yeah.
me.
Cause like,
We keep hammering that one, like
yeah. Cause
for
I
a
think,
reason.
like you said, is that it affects everything you do, how you work out, what you work on. Because if
Right.
you're focusing on things that, if you're trying to be a power pitcher and you're not a power pitcher, well, that's not going to do any good. And if
Right.
you're a power pitcher trying to focus on your style of pitching, they're not going to get by because they don't have all the qualities you have. So, you know,
Yeah. So I mean, you start there. Um, then I think it goes without saying, if you're able to put the ball where you want, commanding it, like it's going to be a good day. You know,
yeah, I always,
we hit on it where um, I didn't have the best stuff coming out of my hand, you know, but I put the ball where I needed to, made adjustments along the way, but like that was the first step in having some success. Is okay, put the ball where I needed to.
well, yeah, like in that no hitter, like I always tell people, it's not the most movement you want. It's actually, you got to command it. And if you can command something, even with less movement, you're going to have success over someone that has more movement, because the more
Yeah.
movement, a lot of times the batters will pick up on the extra movement and they'll lay off it.
Yep.
So sometimes more movement is worse, so,
Yeah.
but
After
I think
that, no, I was gonna say
after that,
after that, reading those batters. I mean, if you can move the ball around and know what to move around and when to move it around based on what you're seeing, like that makes sense to me. You're gonna have a good day.
yeah. And I told you the story about my friend Emo was talking to a group of high school pitchers, along with Jamie's cousin was there. You remember down North Carolina?
You'd
And he
mentioned
was standing, yeah. And he's on a chalkboard. He wrote out, okay, what is the primary job of a pitcher? And they're all shouting out to get the highest speed, the velocity. You got to spin it. You got to get a break and everything. And he started writing on the board, OUT. And it was, a lot of times people forget what the job of it's like, you need to get the most outs with the least amount of runs, the least amount of pitches. And they're so enamored with getting the most spin, the most vertical break, that they forget what their job is. Their job is
yeah,
to get outs with no runs.
right. No, those other things may be ways to help you get out, but you need to find out what your way is.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And that's kind of how the show was born, is that we're talking about all the different things that you need to have success. And having high velocity can help, but that is only one lever of many. You have command and, movement and character and all sorts of things that will help you succeed. And that's one of nine, like the list I showed you.
Yeah,
And
and then
unfortunately, when you watch videos online, people are only focusing on one of the nine things you need.
yeah, and then my last one, movement. I mean, I'm not necessarily talking about the most
Oh,
movement.
big
I'm
time.
talking about that right movement. You know, that late movement,
Yeah,
like
no,
that kind of
movement is
stuff.
critical. Yeah, it's absolutely important. And a simple thing like changing speeds, like when we talked about Bronson taking his sinker and making it two pitches. Well, you could have a sinker and a changeup and do that too. But now, if you have a sinker, a changeup, and you have two sinkers and a changeup, you got three pitches. And
Yep.
now a batter, if he has to think about three things or four things. The more things that he has to worry about you going the zone with, the harder time he has.
That might be one of those things that goes even under the batter's radar, you know what I mean? Where they don't even realize that it's that fifth pitch they're dealing with, but it
Exactly.
doesn't
And
matter. It doesn't
Bronson,
matter because it's different.
right? Bronson pitched for 16 years in the big leagues, throwing 91 mile an hour sinker, and he's
Yeah,
in the Reds Hall of Fame. I mean, he was an awesome pitcher.
it's pretty
Now,
good.
by the standards you see people talk about online, he should have never been a Hall of Famer, let alone 16 years. But we know that there's more than one way to win.
Great example.
No. Hey, Sean, thanks so much for coming on the show. I don't know why it took 24 episodes before you to get on.
No, I just needed to sit in the weeds and pull some ideas from some other people. No, that was fun.
Yeah, that was a lot of fun. I'll talk to you Like every day I talk to you later.
See ya.
Yeah. Don't forget to hit subscribe to get notified when new episodes are released. Pitching Command Show, brought to you by Command Trakker, the smart target that MLB and D1 teams rely upon to measure and train command. Many throw hard, but few command. Visit commandtracker.com.